You know, sometimes I agree with IGN on certain things, and other times I don't agree with IGN. I think that they can be cringy. And then there are moments like these where you just realize that IGN is not the website that it used to be for several reasons. The same people who were working at IGN many years ago just aren't there anymore. It's a completely different company, and they're cringe for different reasons. I remember when they were criticizing Pokemon games for having too much water, but now they're making complaints of a completely different animal, one that we all wish would go away, but they want it to stay. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. From IGN on the 13th, Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade. Simply, I mean, it's obvious it can't be remade, at least not to the standards of Capcom's best work. So the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite. Oh, and if you notice right at the bottom, community notes got them good. This article misconstrues the story of Resident Evil 5. IGN rated the original Resident Evil 5 a 9 out of 10. So clearly, these are not the same people that used to work at IGN. And you know what? This actually confused me a little bit. So I decided that we're going to read this article. The Resident Evil game that can't be remade. We're not going to read the entire thing because it's a lot to go over, but there are some bullet points that I find particularly interesting and really want to share with you guys. So check this out. On the game's 15th anniversary, it's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era, an era of gameplay and narrative decisions best left in the past. I bet you can guess what these guys are talking about over at IGN. You know, it's really funny. Before we continue any further, I actually have a second gaming channel. I will put that link in the description for you guys so you can check it out. But in this gaming channel, I have quoted IGN before, okay? Because I do agree with some of their information. I mean, sometimes they just report gaming news, and that's all we need. But then when they do things like this, it just pushes people away. It pushes me away. No one agrees with this. And to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if they come out in full force defending Sweet Baby Inc. as well. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, but it needs a rewrite, right? So let's read a little bit more about this. Remakes can, of course, completely redefine the structure of their source material. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is, by the way, an awesome game right now. I mean, that there's so much to do in that game. And they say, for example, is recognizably an updated version of the classic RPG, but its world design and gameplay mechanics are a world apart from the 1997 original, and they're not wrong about that. So you could argue, this is funny, they say this, and so you could argue that Resident Evil 5 is actually the Resident Evil most in need of a remake, because a whole new environmental structure and scenario design that reins in the action and dials up the horror would bring it in line with Capcom's other remakes. So they're like, well, this doesn't need a remake, it needs a rewrite. Well, okay, wait, actually, it does need a remake. It needs a remake more than the other games do. But then they go on to say, but all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem, racism. So this was controversial way back in the day. Okay, because I remember seeing this trailer myself, the Resident Evil 5 trailer. Everyone's like, oh, they're just going to kill a bunch of black people. But when the game came out, it came out to widespread universal acclaim, including from IGN themselves. If you look right here, 9.3, okay? It's not just a 9, 9.3. Amazing, they say, by Jeff Haynes. It may not be a radically new Resident Evil 5, but the PC version of the game still manages to hold its own with an improved control scheme and an extra mercenaries mode. And in this article, in this review, all they talk about is the mechanics. All they talk about is how much more they've innovated in the Resident Evil series, in the gameplay specifically. They have nothing to say about the racism allegedly in this game. And they gave it an amazing, I mean, that's 0.7 away from a perfect 10. And how much you want to bet that the criticisms about this game, that 0.7 on the scale had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that this takes place in Africa. And by the way, IGN are a bunch of hypocrites, not just with a 15-year gap with a 9.3 amazing and then them flipping the script today in this modern age, but they did this just the other day. Look at this. Assassin's Creed Red protagonist seemingly revealed in another odd Ubisoft leak. They're not criticizing this. And you know why they're not criticizing it? Because it fits their narrative. They think that this is a good idea. Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people. Yes, technically it is the Ouroboros virus that protagonist Chris Redfield is fighting, but the parasite's host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even before their infection. Intentionally or not, Resident Evil 5 positions Africa as the dark continent, an uncivilized world harboring a diseased population that needs gunning down via Western intervention in the name of global security. This insensitive treatment of people of color was hotly debated, even as early as Resident Evil 5's debut trailer, with writers such as this person and that person pointing out the game's uncomfortable post-colonial imagery. Yeah, and then they gloss over the fact that they gave it a 9.3 out of 10. But let's continue on. The arguments and think pieces continued well into the game's release window, with IGN's own former editor-in-chief, Hillary Goldstein, having also wrestled with the subject. But that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate rather than a reality. Oh, so it was just a debate in 2009? Race doesn't exist in 2024? I don't understand that statement. In the 2020s, in a post-Black Lives Matter world, there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game. No. So they don't want to depict black people as disease-ridden and accurately depict one of the more poorer parts of Africa. No, they want to paint black people in a good light 100% of the time because they're the actual racists. That's the reality of the people working at IGN and in the shill media right now. They're like, no, don't do that. That'll make black people look bad. You can't do that. That's just another form of racism. Because when people are playing this game, it was a success and IGN loved the game. Okay, they're like, oh, well, they wrestled with the controversy. That doesn't matter because what matters is the review they gave it. And it was a very successful video game. Lots of people love it. And even IGN themselves acknowledge in this video that it needs a remake. But their idea is that, oh, you need to completely rewrite it. Not just remake it, rewrite it. You need to write out all the black people being the bad guys. You need to make it fair and diverse for diversity's sake. Just make the bad guys the parasite and spare the black people from being killed by the evil white man. But right here in the Assassin's Creed article, they don't say anything about that. They don't say that like there's cultural appropriation going on because to them, it's a post-Black Lives Matter world. That's the world that they think we live in. And so because of that, it's okay if a black samurai is the main character in a game that takes place in feudal Japan. Of course, that makes sense to IGN. That's completely okay because them inserting a black person into the game, which is fine. But when it comes to white people, no, you can't do that. Absolutely not okay. These articles are just months apart. So it's not like they just don't contradict themselves. They do. The fact of the matter is that people love Resident Evil. They love Resident Evil 5. I love Resident Evil 5. In fact, I'm just going to speed run it just to spite IGN because that game's fun and it stands the test of time just like Resident Evil 4 does. They really, by the way, they defend Resident Evil 4 in this article and they're like, it can never match up to the genius and amazingness of Resident Evil 4. But I mean, you were in Spain killing a bunch of their people. What did they have to say about that? Because they don't really believe in what they're saying. And that's my point about this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and share it if you haven't had the chance. That would be awesome. And hey, if you're feeling ultra spicy, consider subscribing to my channel so that you're always up to date on what kind of thing I've got going on. I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Later. Meow, meow.